I even had this reflection for a while that a documentary might survive a bit longer than the films of fiction. If they don't speak to the microphone, I unfortunately cannot translate. So you. Yeah, the material life.
Słuchajcie, przepraszam bardzo, ponieważ jakby w tytule tutaj mamy nawet sesja questions and answers, że jakby mamy tutaj dwa elementy, pytania i odpowiedzi. Jeżeli nie będziecie mówić do mikrofonu, to będą tylko odpowiedzi. Innymi słowy, będzie to dość abstrakcyjny wykład dla tych, którzy mamy osoby obcojęzyczne i mamy ludzi, którzy słuchają na sieci, więc bardzo bym prosił, żebyście wy...
Już jesteśmy, siedzimy.
Słuchajcie, jak wolicie, tylko proszę po prostu o dyscyplinę, jeśli chodzi o mikrofon, bo potem rzeczywiście wychodzą z tego abstrakcyjne.
Tak. Widać twarz.
Halo, dzień dobry. No chcę powiedzieć to, co inauguracyjnym. Mam do czynienia z moimi ludźmi. Nie znamy się i pracowaliśmy razem. Znaczy nie pracowałem z Wojtkiem, ale odwiedzałem ich w Londynie, jak byliśmy Harry Pottera. Nowonarodzone dziecko przywiezione z Polski, które zostało tam wychowane, a poza tym poznali się na Syberii.
So they met in Siberia. They were making movies in South America. It's more difficult to find. It's more difficult to find a creative partner than a wife, I said in my opening lecture. But here, it worked very well together, both wife and a creative partner. And I really recommend you to find out artistic partners. Being alone in our domain, in our industry, is not the best choice. Is not the best option. Making a creative group, partners, based on partners where everybody has equal rights, is a fantastic solution. They work together, they work apart, they have a fantastic family. I'm extremely happy that you came here both, and I'm leaving you with our participants from Springers. Thank you, Sławomir. So this was born during my work with Sławek in London. Oh, we do have microphones. This is just for questions. No, let me just relate to what Sławek mentioned, because yesterday our Nella, who's 18 right now, and 18 years ago, when I was a cinematographer with Sławek, there was no other option than to get my family. Well, you could just go there alone. Or you could just cancel the contract. Yeah, there it goes. Yeah, there were different options on the table. We selected the one that I decided to have this fantastic offer of Sławek to take part in this Hollywood Harry Potter. No, it was in a different way. You came home and I was lying, and I felt very bad. And you said you cannot get up before you listen to the end until what I have to tell you. No, maybe I will not be going to too much detail. So we have to decide. So Sławek was calling somebody to ask about you, to Krzysztof Krause, to ask if you are okay. Yeah, it was like a beauty contest. This way or another, we had to decide within a weekend, and then you went, and you were a bit disappointed that everything is so automatic. It's like a factory. But then Sławek, I don't remember if you said to Wojtek that even if once you will get behind the camera, it's good there to be throughout all this time. Yeah, because initially the first cinematographer who went with the director, there was a system where there were two cameras on the set, and the first cameraman was the director's cameraman. And for the first days, they had this style that they did a lot in Steadicam master shots. And quite often, and until it got sometimes I got adapted. I was standing on the side and I was a bit disappointed that I cannot stand behind the camera. And then we sort of managed to get along better. The director started to believe us that the ideas of the second camera worked well. But I was, after my debut as the cinematographer here in Poland with Krzysztof Krause, it was the Savior's Square. That was the name of the film, and we were doing this film with small crew. Piotrek Sobociński was working with us in this crew, who was one of the celebrities of Film Spring Open. I started from a very art house cinema to cinema where everything is planned 10 months in advance. But I just don't want to talk about this. The interesting part here is that Gosia decided that we should go there with our whole family, and she was 8 months pregnant. There was a problem with getting on the plane, but we managed to get the certification from the gynecologist that he has nothing against, and Nella was born during the filming. We had 3 days. I got 3 days free from the producer, and he was really fair. He said, "Okay, 3 days off. I'm paying you for those 3 days." So we made a party, like a baby shower. Sławek was there, and the whole Kamil crew, the whole crew was there. Heniu, the focus puller, was helping us a lot. We had to sort of release the rented place before we flew out, so we were living with Henio for the last week. And Janek was in the first grade at that time. He started his school life there. Gosia was born in a hospital in England. I really recommend this. How did it start? It started in such a way that we met in high school. We are a high school sweetheart. We're high school sweethearts. I didn't know that I will be a filmmaker, but I knew I will be a photographer because I was running around with the camera everywhere. But it was more, excursions and nature, and that's how it stayed. So close-ups of spiders, Well, I did a lot of. I photographed you a lot. That's true, and it somehow transferred into our first movie. Our universities put us apart. She was in Warsaw, I was in Łódź, always on a train, and that was a bit difficult in terms of our relationship. But then, then we got the car, the first car, Mały Fiat, and when I was in my penultimate year in the film school, we came up with this idea to go after the university. Gosia wanted to teach Polish, but in an extreme place, in Siberia. And I, at that time, I thought to myself that this might be a great inspiration to make a movie in Siberia. And because during my last year I was working as a cinematographer, I managed to, from every now and then, I managed to work in Polish Film Chronicle. These were the last years of this famous Polish film chronicle, when on a 35mm film they were recording the most important events in Poland, such as, I don't know, a flood or joining NATO a lot of things were happening at that time, at the end of the 1990s. And me with that camera, I was running around there. The Chronicle, when I told them about my journey to Siberia, they said, okay, I will try to if you write the script, we'll try to maybe produce it somehow and get money for this. And we were so determined to take this trip. Gosia was in this course for teachers in the East. I decided that even if I don't have money for the movie, I will be taking photographs. I will just go with a camera, and I will be developing the films myself. I was very much attached to photography at that time. Of course, it's cool. In the film school, I transferred more into the movies, but this photography was a very important part of me and gave me this feeling that if I fail as a cinematographer, I could always be the photographer. This is something that will give me this creative freedom. And without graduate, I didn't yet graduate from the film school. It was September. The exams were in October, so I left the film roles for my colleagues so that they could show it during the exam. Gosia quickly defended her master thesis in Applied Linguistics Institute in Warsaw. We went to Siberia, and we've managed to get the money for the movie. I was cast. I had a casting by one producer whom we decided to skip at that time. That was a producer who did a lot of TV shows. At that time, he was also doing documentaries, and somebody recommended him to me. We went to the meeting, and he behaved a bit like he scared us away, especially Gosia, because he treated you a bit like a tool. Whether you will do well as a protagonist of that movie, whether that movie will work. Long story short, we were supported by another studio, and our first movie was made, the first joint movie. You can't say that, but it was for better or worse. Right now, if a boy like that comes, who will produce him? So they did their mission. They trusted us by producing a movie by student looking at your pictures before and looking at your style. So it is a producer's risk. What sort of risk do they have if they're financed by the state? Yes, it was like a state-owned film group. Yes, they had a good sense of style. So I remember that at that time the head of this studio said during the meeting with me, I don't know you, I don't know what you can do, but looking at your idea, I see that even if you don't do it well, it might be a very interesting movie. It might be interesting for the audience. So he did have this sixth sense. It was a topic that, a young girl, first work, goes to Siberia. So it is something that draws attention. That in the documentary is very important. There is something that you say in one sentence, and it sort of encourages you. It's like a log line that encourages you to see this movie. Of course, there's a question how you do it, what will be the results, what will be the protagonist. Here it occurred that she's very good, and you pulled the story. You carried this story, and the film was shown in Kraków, in Paris, and then we got the award. One of the awards allowed us to get financing for the next movie, where we decided we'll make a missionary in Bolivia. And we went to Bolivia for a year using our sort of internship in Argentina. We managed to get a foothold in the university in North Argentina, and we were making a movie about a Polish missionary in Bolivia for a year. And it occurred that back from the stipend, we came with our son after that year. So he got born in there during the shooting of that movie. We came back as a 3, and we made our second movie, Misionero. And then we did, of course, it changes. So there is a family with kids. Even being pregnant in this Le Misionero, I was not shooting that movie. we went there to do them as a couple, but at some point, yeah, well, I recorded the sound for a few scenes, but at some I decided to stay there because we were supposed to come back. We were very close to the decision that we were coming back. We were giving back this money that we were left with to the producer and saying, "There's no movie." Because the first protagonist was not good. Yeah, there were like dramatic situations because there were times without the internet, and we exchanged 2 faxes with the protagonist, a Polish young priest that was supposed to be there for since not a long time, and he occurred when we met him. He was a totally alienated guy. He didn't want to establish any connection with us. He was afraid. He closed himself in his room. For 2 weeks, we spent 2 weeks in his parish. We went with him into the mountains. But at some point, he said he can help us, with to contact with the Indians, but he doesn't see a movie about himself. And then he had all sorts of crises, and he dropped his priesthood, and he went to work in a hospital. He came back to Poland, and his the crisis of faith. So we for a month we were looking for another protagonist. We started to move around. We went from Argentina to Bolivia because somebody gave us some contact details. In Bolivia, it occurred that the Gosia is pregnant in the conditions where you have no roads, where you have 4,000 meters altitude, and until that moment she was bearing that very well, but psychosomatically. Don't dwell on that. Just move on. When you learned about it, you felt okay. I felt it. Just move on. And that was our biggest dilemma, because we have no protagonist, we have no film started. Gosia started to feel bad. We don't know what is the perspective of the birth. That was horrible. Yes, if something was wrong with Janek, for example. Everything cost $2,000 just being in a hospital with a healthy baby and giving birth to a healthy baby. For those times, for us, these were astronomical money, and I think we weren't aware of anything. Well, from the perspective of time, I think all these difficult the situations bring us together. I felt better in England and Argentina than in the hospital of Święta Saint Sofia. I tried to adapt in Warsaw. There is much better approach to a woman in all those other countries. At that time, when Nella was getting born, when we were awaiting Nella, that there was no support. Okay. So every cloud has a silver lining. Then we with another big documentary, which we planned after 10 years or 8 years after our departure, our journey to Argentina, we decided that we want to produce a movie ourselves. Yes, because these 2 movies are not ours. El Misionero and this Siberian Lesson. You put in your life, you put in your work, you put in so much of your time. So always make sure that when you agree with producers, that after 10 years the movie comes back to the director, or all rights, or at least some rights. This is the case in those 2 cases, and Polish Film Institute requires you only 7 years. The producer has rights for 7 years. Over 7 years, nobody's asking any questions. So this is actually a very good. I would better take care of a movie, the Siberian Lesson or El Misionero, which is not even digitalized. It's because it was made on the 16mm camera. It had feature copies with the sound, and in festivals in those years, at the end of the 1990s and the beginning of 2000s, the festivals required an optic copy. And of course, later when all this changes, and everything was digitalized. And I remember that I digitalized the Siberian lesson with the help of Filip Kovcin as a token of friendship, and to do the correction. But El Misionero is not digitalized because WFD is so overwhelmed with its archives that it cannot do it cannot digitize everything. So the films of all those former film crews, WFD became the owner, and not all the movies are considered as first rate and are considered priority in terms of digitization. So if the author had the right to his own films, he would take care of it. So I don't know, the producing a documentary is a very difficult task. But in general, our first contact with the documentary production, do you remember it was during the film My Nikifor by Krzysztof Krause. And Krzysztof Krause, who invited me to this project because he saw the Siberian lesson. We were together on the jury of amateur film festival in the cafe in Jelonki in Warsaw, in those small Finnish cottages, like student films, etc., etc. And Krzysztof, he has this gift that he was interested in people, and that's why he agreed. Because he made the Dead, a very famous movie, and he was like a top director at that time, but he was still in jury of those amateur movies, and I was invited there too because I was after the Siberian lesson. And Krzysztof said, "Who are you? I don't really know you." And I brought him the VHS with the Siberian lesson, and on the next day he calls me and says, "I'm making my next movie with you. Let's meet." And then they said, "Okay, you're old, that you're making your first movie and you're 32. I remember that. And that there were like these musings. I was 10 years after my school because I went immediately. I was 18 from December, so I was the youngest in the school. I graduated when I was 22, but I'm very happy that I was waiting so much for my first feature, because those 10 years when I was doing documentaries and I was working also in a theater with lighting and displays and projections, it broadened. I grew up. I matured as a human, because in a feature, the feature requires certain maturity. There was very little work, because at the beginning of 2000 it were thin years. They were like poor years in the Polish fiction movie. There was no Polish Film Institute. The world was very hermetic. It was very closed, and there was only a few selected people made features. Nobody else was allowed in, and it was very difficult to get inside. And I remember my first meeting with Sławomir Ridziak. I remember when WDF was selling its all equipment, and I bought from them a camera that I was working with in the Chronicle, and somebody called me that they are needing in 2004 for a commercial that he will be doing for Sławek Ridziak will be doing for comedians, and he needed a crash camera. We've heard somebody said that you had such a crash camera. I said, yes, I do. Okay, so come. So I came for one day, and I did the third camera for this commercial, and I remember you gave me. It was incredible, because you really gave me a sort of free rein, because the first shot was when the horse had to jump over the camera. It was like in a hole in the ground, and then he said, stand around with this camera, do some dynamic stuff, try to do some filming, see what you find attractive here. And I spent this one day with you, and I remember there were two cameramen, one Tomek Kuzio, he was my peer from the university, and they were well established in terms of operating a camera. And even today, they're very good camera holders by profession. And I was a bit of a hunter, working from the side, more documentary type, and without some special stress that I should do something better. But I like that, because this slowness that I had at that time allowed me to have fun. And I remember later that somebody then called from the production that he was watching your material, Sławek, and he even liked it and said it's nice. I was really happy, and then I totally forgot about it. 3 months later, I got a telephone from you about the Harry Potter. So I'm coming back to that because this freedom that we have when we're behind the camera, I was taught that by a documentary, because a feature, quite often the number of people, the expectations of the director and the producers sort of tie our hands. We try to be for somebody. We try to do something for someone. But when I'm alone or with a director, this is like a full creative freedom. And then I felt that in photography, so all this feeling that it has to be mine, as I feel it, that I should play with this. I'm trying to transfer that into those feature things. But I digress, because we're supposed to talk about production. So this all sort of got intertwined, this operator's life with our life and your life as a producer, because you initially didn't want to be a producer. No, I still don't want to be a producer. It just I think I'm a control freak, and being a producer gives me sort of satisfies my need, but I put in more of my emotions, my own nerves and frustrations. But well, I'm doing it for something, so there is some subconscious plan there with this, because I'm still not resigning. As I said yesterday, I'm fascinated by finding new talents, and in every scope, especially in filming, especially here, I need a multi-layer talent of an artist, and this is something that I really enjoy. For me, also, a lot of time has passed to divide producing my husband's films and not my husband's films. The first film that I produced was the Martin Krawczyk short form, and Wojtek was a cinematographer there. But I remember, it was not that I decided to make a movie of a different director. But there was nobody to produce this. So I set up a company. It was a form of functioning. We set up a company in 2005. Okay, in 2005, but for a different product. For Nikifor. Yes, I was with Krzysztof Krause on the set there. And there I noticed that incredible things happen to Mrs. Feldman, who was playing who was cast in a main character. She was 86 or 87 at that time. She was so incredible that I remember during the night, after the second day of shooting, I checked on Allegro where I can find a camera, and I went to Lubaczów, to the other side of Poland. And I bought a camera. We put all our money in this. Panasonic DV, the first Panasonic DV with manual Leica lens. It was a long time before Canon D5. Sony at that time had this 150 camera. The first one, the first DV, which was very popular in documentaries. And Panasonic had this. It was called, I don't remember the model, like this Coral. for DV cassettes, and I started to shoot spontaneously between the shots, and I was shooting this documentary which was called Mrs. Nikifor, and we set up a company to sell it to a TV. It was not as a production; we sold it a ready movie to the Polish broadcast, and this is how it started. And you should have co-produced with TV, but we were just happy that somebody noticed that movie, so we sold everything. This movie is theirs for some, like a few thousand zlotys. No, maybe a few dozen thousands. No, come on, not that much. No, not dozens, not dozens. Okay, we can check. Dozens. Unfortunately, I can't hear anything. Basically, on what rules did you sell did that, and what would you change in terms of selling? If I were a bit wiser at that time, I would have some knowledge, which I have now. I would want to be the majority producer and for them to finance partly this movie. So I would later be able, after a few years, I would be able to take control of this film, to sell it to others, etc. To be forever the owner of the rights to this movie, and not. But let's say we made it in such a way that we sold a ready product, which fully was transferred to the hands of the TV station in a documentary form. But as you said, sell the license, but it was not the license, but you can sell the rights. Instead of selling the license, you can sell the rights, which means selling the image, the film effectively. I will check what was the price tag, but the film is there. Maybe Wojtek has some royalties, but still, right now there's this big discussion about the royalties. The director and the scriptwriter and the DOP, in case of documentary, gets better than a producer. When producer sold everything, you have no rights whatsoever left. So in the next, the TV was our co-producer, and they give us a certain percent of the budget. It had rights to broadcasting. So this is something that you have to negotiate. They shouldn't tell you from the TV that this is the contracts we are signing. So you know everything is negotiable. The fact that they say that, it's not that it has to be like this in this case. With the Argentinian lesson, it was this movie. There were like 1 million people who watched that, and all the commercials that they were broadcasting before that, they paid back because they didn't have to pay anybody for the broadcasting. So we didn't also separate co-production and license, but we gave away everything. But we're wiser now. But again, for 7 years now, we didn't do anything with the TV because we couldn't do that. And now I don't know if anybody will be interested. When we did Brothers with the TV, the bureaucracy was so horrible. It was some sort of a nightmare to settle the finances. The man, I was settling this with a guy who was actually a pensioner, but he was taking care of this movie earlier when I signed the contract with the TV. So he went out of the force and said that he will help us settle this. I have a slightly different question. In a documentary, I understand you make a protagonist, but in the meanwhile, you have a protagonist number 2. Are you filming something additionally, thinking that something will be there, but then you delete this material after years? You think maybe we'll do something with this. We have something like this, or is it automatically that I understand this footage is yours and you can do everything with it, but co-producer TVP has cooperated with us. So can you does it happen like that they realize that you must have been filming at the same time? Will they also require you some sort of copyright, etc.? We'll ask for this. We'll ask for this co-production, or is this footage is so independent that you can use whatever you want with it? I don't feel this to be a problem. Nobody watches all the footage with us. We know what was used, what we sold at that time. We're selling a movie, and what is in the movie this is the division of the rights. We cannot question that they're co-owners of the movies, but the producer is the main owner of the footage. Of course, they're also a producer, but they're just a co-producer. That's an interesting question, by the way. That's true. A very good question, but then you have to try to prove that it was not shot at that time. I'll try to be brutal. You know that you can make 2 out of or 3 movies based on one piece of material. You agreed with TV for one. You have 2 fantastic materials. We never had a situation like this. Would that be unfair towards the co-producer? We had that with the Argentinian lesson. A producer from Sweden came to us. We sent him some sort of a cut, not a final cut. After our 2-year stay in Argentina, he said, "This is so interesting that I can get you money for a documentary there about the children from that village. You can make different portraits of those kids." He didn't even suggest anything. He just said that he would make a series about that. He said, "We have a big parity for films about kids, about youth in Scandinavia, in Sweden and Denmark. This is what you get money on." And I even started to think, but you have to write it for me. I wasn't very good in writing, so I didn't like it, but I started to shoot some other characters there, and then I realized that this is so much work that I felt overwhelmed. You would have to take away 1 year of your life only for this to make it well. And I wanted to focus on this one movie, and I let it go. But since for many years we had this part 2 of that movie, Revisit. Oh, that's right. Our short documentary shot in 2004, which was later produced by TVP. It was WFD who produced that. We didn't have rights to that material. But for our own money, we added some scenes thinking that we will produce the life of those protagonists after some time, because they tried to get away to England, and it failed because TV didn't give us money for that. But I am in discussions right now with people who are filming for the Munch Studio something that they would want to do, something short for themselves, short for Munch and long for themselves. Everything depends on how do you call it in a contract. They have a German co-producer who did that already, and he's able to make a contract just in such a and negotiate it in such a way so that the Munch Studio would agree that the material that I use in the short form, and they should not be used again, of course, but only these are owned by the Munch Studio, and everything else can be owned by yourself. You have to have a very vigilant lawyers. It's the time of the lawyers, by the way. If you're making your first movie, you should focus on one good movie, because if you start to make long forms, short forms, a version for a different producer who wants something else. Quite often, those international producers have their own profiles. To put it in some sort of a drawer and give you they force a topic on you to make it turn in such a way or another way. I cooperated with Jurek Śladkowski from Sweden when he had producers from Sweden, from Finland, and from Germany. He had to make 3 versions of a movie because every TV from every country wanted something else. The same story, the same protagonists, but edited in a different way. It's a lot of work. And if you have a lot of experience, you can do that. And if you're more professional in this. In the beginning, however, when we're telling a story that is important for us, it's better to focus on one good movie, and that's it. In case of Apollonia, there was supposed to be a 50-minute and 1.5 hour, like 90-minute versions. And only after only after the studio realized that the one version they realized it would be the best version. They wanted to be a part of the best version. But these are just recent years. Even my sound engineer was agreed with me for the TV version, and then suddenly it's also interesting, because nobody knows really. She until the very end she knew she will be shortening that, but also the money was agreed. That is what she was supposed to change. But there's plenty of details in those lines. Some of the protagonists have already passed away. How did you wait for this? Because there you had a director. It was like a debut. Where she started, she didn't know if she would not finish this in a half a month, because she made a school movie. She did not do it. She was making it. She was developing her school etude. She treated that this film as a way of life. It was so that other producers have left her, but the longer it occurred, it was the better. She was also sick. In a documentary production against a feature movie, which is so well planned and so precise, here you have plenty of moments where you don't know if it's going to go on, if this film will appear, if it will take place, if it will be finished. There is a place for a certain doubt, for a certain freeze. Out of 1,200 mails I was talking about yesterday, most were about that you don't know when Lea will be able to work again. That was so surprising. But we were not supposed to get excited about this, because I hate to make a bad movie fast. So when she was doing this, I knew it's going in the right direction. I don't know, what was your last question? I was asking about your vigilance in production, because you had a number of it went through through the hands of many producers before it got to you. And why did it get to you? Hanka Stylicowa wanted to produce Brothers, but there was TV there already. It was impossible. She's going to pitchings, and she called me and said that there's a project Apollonia, which she thinks is so great that she would imagine that our cooperation with them would be good for the movie. But then she switched off for 7 years or something, and I was left with the leading producer. Oh, she had, of course, she did had you. I felt in Lea something because I saw her 2 movies, the one about her father, the other one about the actress who's pregnant, and the husband would come back from work, who's an actor, and would ask, what did she said, what did you do? I was developing the eyes of my child, being pregnant. She was just pissed off by the questions that he's asking and checking if she did something. I was really interested in her perspective, Lea's perspective. It was a very brave perspective, and her movie gives a certain sensitivity. And she has feels this mission in the movie, which is, I would say, a bit apart of the movie, the role that this film has to play. I'm surprised to what extent this movie, the role that this movie played, because it was very problematic for me. We didn't earn any money on it. It was more of a hobby making this movie, but thankfully it was financed by PiS. Then at least I could demand certain things that I couldn't be totally ignored, because piece demands certain things. So then I would say that I expect that in negotiations with the leading producer, because they have very big experience in being a leading producer of a documentary. This is their special. They have specialties. In Denmark, you're either documentary or fiction. We think that we have this high culture of documentary, and they believe it even more. They have a very good market of I would say, very artistic documentaries, especially cinematic ones. With the story well told, well filmed, you can see the weight of producer's input, that the producer takes care of the high quality of the movie. This expert system in their institutions is that they see the movie. Once they see the movie, they really lead that movie throughout the process. So we've learned from the Danes that in their cinematography, even if before the war, they had financing of documentaries. It was their priority, national priority, very early on. It started in 1930s. The same applies to children's movies. What I mentioned before, they have very strong priorities in their film production, and they found their place in the world. And of course, from the artistic perspective, Polish film is very strong in the world's perception. But the Danish is very strong too. They have their own film school. But in Czech Republic, for example, they have a documentary film institute. We don't have that. In the general meaning of the film industry, documentary is treated like a worse child. It's not good to take part in. There's no support in introducing the movie to the cinema. I don't know if you're applying to PIS right now. You had those the distribution list, the letter from a distributor. How can you get a letter from a distributor if you will be filming something for 13 years, and who will agree that he will guarantee in 13 years time that the distributor will be there? The whole system is a bit weird, a totally different logic. But we shouldn't complain. We have a number of millions, so many millions of zlotys per year in PIS of a budget for documentaries. It's not that bad. So the Munch studio, for example, it's a great possibility to have a start, because good projects pass there, but it's very little money. It's like 50,000, and they block the possibility of looking for money somewhere else. You can look for it, but it will be their money. They will also be their part. Concerning money, I also have a question. I understand this is some sort of a percentage share. If you feel that it's 10-20% that the producer should earn in theory, do you think it's realistic? I, as a producer, must say that it's unrealistic. How do you assume that? I'm talking about musical videos, forms, that 40%. How do you perform that in performance? Human costs and post-production costs. This is how I make assumptions. I'm asking about the documentary because it seems more difficult. So assuming that I would like to earn 10-20%, I need to assume 40% of my money, because otherwise I will go bust. With documentary, I was wondering, shouldn't you assume 50 or 60%? Because I can really go bust. That's my question. Those templates in PIS say that 10-20% for a producer, it's totally unrealistic. I don't know if they suggest anything like that. There are items like this. You have general costs, but for a producer, all this is true that you're saying, and we've been through that too. But there's also something that after my university, I thought there's a certain uneasiness about the authors. What does the producer do with that money? Because we got money for the movie. Where did this money go? 2 million is of course for a feature. Let's say 200,000 for a documentary, or 150,000. But if you look at this budget, and if you look at how much time it will get, the production, post-production, this money disappears overnight. So the blanket is always short on this side or on that side. In Polish conditions, it's impossible to do only documentaries. It's not. You also have to have some idea for life, different ideas. Unless doing things fast, it doesn't give you good movies. So if you are to make bad movies and not get money, then I prefer to make good movies. And then after years you come to conclusions which are not already obsolete. When you're observing that somebody does something well and it gives a beautiful effect, this is a great thing. But from the business perspective, I haven't found a way to make things work financially. Yeah, like the majority of, like Leah also said that she's not able to live only on this job. In this, we have minority co-production, that to some extent it is one of my legs, as my second leg. But if in peace you sign a contract for 2 years, it's not very helpful, because you have to assume this money, you have to get them from different sources. My goal is always to sign contract with peace before we enter the set, because I cannot put forward this money. After the first week, people want to be paid. This is so stressful for me. Yeah, they did the job and it is normal. And there's no discussion. And I say, what can I tell you? And they said, don't tell me anything, because I heard everything. I heard all the explanations and excuses. And you will not surprise me. Let's just stop here and just tell me when you can pay me. Like, paying somebody else is a very stressful part, and peace does not support you. Let's say you're on the set because you're filming, and you ask Peace to pay you money earlier. They won't. Those people, get monthly pay, and they live in a totally different reality. Sorry, I can't hear anything. It can or it may not, depending on how you agree. I saw other producers saying how dangerous it is for them and how difficult it was for them that somebody saw it. But in general, there is no rule. Whether you should show the budget or not. We had this discussion that, I don't know, there was some regional fund and the director sort of showed the budget to this fund, but I never showed that budget because they could copy that, and I felt discomfort. It's better to have everything agreed in the beginning. So all these, from my point of view.
Ale to jest takie protekcjonalne i takie, wiesz, że ty lepiej, jest takie...
because usually it is so that it takes so much time because he's a beginner. I usually deal with beginners, and this imagination, this visions where this money is, are very hurting for me. But after many years, I know that you need to talk and be very transparent and explain different words. Where does this money go? Yes, you can all go. You can all this. You can discuss this all, because I feel that young people are much better educated. There are more young producers. The culture of discussion. It's not. People are not afraid to speak about money. We are at the last stage of editing a documentary that was inspired by Film Spring Open when I had with Bogdan Dziworski, a group with Bogdan Dziworski about 10 years ago. And a member said, you have to make a movie about Bogdan Dziworski. I said, there is a movie about Bogdan Dziworski, but there's no film about Agnieszka Bojanowska, film editor. And we had this idea to make a movie that will look at them at their cooperation. I managed to, the last 8 days when they were editing this movie, to be with them in the editing room. And there was this and we created this portrait, a sort of a artistic love story, which takes place in the editing room and in the kitchen over the editing room. And now we are finishing the editing of our movie because Agnieszka passed away. In the meantime, Bogdan stopped working on this movie. There were some problems with the producer. Well, the production halted. Agnieszka was at this sort of spiritus moments that gave hope that this film will be made until the end. But this is not the topic of my movie. My movie is about their meeting and their creative friendship. We don't know. Would it be less than an hour? Or more? Maybe between 50 or 60 minutes. So bad length. A length nobody likes. That was always our weak point, because I was making movies where I thought I liked them, and I believe that even until today that having documentaries of 80 or 90 minutes in many cases loses the quality. This movie is watered down, even though Apollonia has certain points, twist points, or I would say the points of change. In documentary, you don't have so many points of change because you need the drama in a documentary anyway. If you do not have the drama, it should be even shorter. If it's more contemplative and slow cinema, more than 1 hour, it's difficult to bear in the cinema. In case of my movies, I don't know. I had this feeling. I always follow Mick Jagger's advice. It's better to play 1 hour too short than 1 hour too long. Sometimes I regret that, because with both lessons, the Siberian and Argentinian lessons, I could put a few more scenes into that. But at that time, this is how I felt, and I was in agreement with myself.
No,
71. This is full feature. Below 40. It's just for them to accept you. Every festival has different frames, but the biggest problem is half an hour. Nobody knows what to do with it. Argentinian lesson was 59 minutes in 25 frames, and the other one had 36 minutes. So in camera image it was short, even though it was 63 minutes. Sorry, not 33, 63. So they looked at it in a different way. Somebody input in a different way. So it's difficult to say. 1 hour, you have to know that 1 hour of movie, if you make it 25 FPS, like all cameras, smaller cameras are set, if you do DCPA copy after that, the standard is 24 minutes. You get 3 minutes longer. You have 3 minutes difference per hour. This is a technical digression. The cinema owners are afraid of that because not all cinemas will be able to display that. Let me now move away from you, because you created a certain brand which follows the brand so precisely that it's very difficult for me to listen to it. But you're observing the market of documentary, which is broader than just recording of here now, because you had historical documents or reaching for historical archives. I'm thrilled to see finding really bad pictures and improving them with artificial intelligence. In Netflix, we have a number of documentaries where we have people who are not alive anymore, or something is being created out of one frame, and somebody had like six seasons of a monologue. And he never said those words, but we have his voice registered from a certain epoch. Do you see a certain formula that is interesting for you in this? And what do you think, how do you think, will you have a separation in the future with a documentary which will be there? Because these are like two different ways of thinking about documentaries. A historical document is a bit different than Apollonia. What do you think about this trend that sort of has this surprising presence of AI, new ways of imagining of times and different responsibility for the director? That's why we cannot finish Bojanowska and Dziworski, because I would like her to say whether she likes our editing or not. And I have this idea, and I feel she's saying that to me, that she doesn't like this version. Technically, this is absolutely possible, even though that especially that we have found in her editing room a positive fragment of a documentary by Andrzej Munk from the 1950s, in which she played. It was a staged documentary, something about Warsaw, A Morning in Warsaw. She played this young girl who enters the bus and runs out. She's 20-something. This is a beautiful footage with her, and we're using that in our movies. We even wondered whether, on the basis of this half a minute fragment, are you able to create something else, or even make her voice younger? Because we have, you can do that. These are like the simple. Technically, these are the simplest thing. It stems from the automation of work and very technical approach. I believe that as long as you balance, as long as you don't hurt anyone, as long as it doesn't, if it's not the result of the movie that we hurt someone, then it can be, such tricks can be really beautiful. Are they authentic? What do you mean by authentic? Yeah, you know what Robert Bresson said in 1960s? That reality is not true yet. It's not yet truth. What does it mean to film reality? And this is authentic. It's not authentic, because camera processes that. You frame the reality, so you manipulate this. There's nothing like objective truth in the cinema. So a number of processes, like in a classical process, the most analog one changes the reality so much that this truth has to be created there. We are creating this screen truth. Yes, that's what I was asking about, this responsibility. You feel this responsibility. Do you feel it's very, very big on your part? It deforms reality. To what extent do you feel a deformer of reality? Yesterday's movie was absolutely ingenious. Like The Red Path was absolutely fantastic, and I saw that you observe a lot, that you want to learn something from the reality, from those people. You have a lot of respect, because I think it was not easy. Well, I am inspired by what I see, what is here now, what is on the go. This is the most beautiful thing. This is what I like the most in cinematography, that I can talk about the film earlier with the director, but when I enter the set and when I see the light and the stage design and the actor especially with their with their current state, they're the biggest inspiration. So whichever concept you would create earlier, so you have to put certain freshness on this preparation. It totally doesn't negate what you say. Maybe this is AI. Multiplying the love. No, that's life. That's life. No, guys, come on. It's good they're not. There's no. It's not about suffering. Does it work? What are the traps of making movies faster than in a several years process? I'm not talking about like really doing something rapidly, but if you want to show the truth, well, you have to have a good DOP and a good editor. If you have a good team, crew, then you can do things faster. It's worse and a good idea. Such idea is a structure in itself. Because if you don't have that, then you have all those traps. The first trap is that this film starts to go in different directions. It starts to go apart. Then the pictures did not went well because you didn't catch something. Then the editor doesn't know what to do with it, and at the end of the day, you don't like it, and you change the editor. So these are all the traps that are unfortunately our everyday reality. So you have a good idea and a good crew, you can do it film faster. This is possible. But this is a situation, an ideal situation of sorts. It doesn't happen often. Depends on who speaks to whom. Because if I speak about my idea to Wojtek, I'm very sensitive to his but. When he says but, and I stop listening to him at that point. But we're talking about a documentary. Yeah, I'm talking about the idea. So what the other person thinks about this but. On the other side, I have a director who came with a movie about Krzysztof Ptak, her famous father, and she's been making this movie for 7 years, and now she decided she changed and the view on her life and of Krzysztof Ptak, and I waited until the moment when this is a movie about something else, but I was not able to say that I'm waiting for this. But I patiently agreed. Wojtek also agreed that we can produce her movie. But this is beautiful because it grows on you, and the film grows. But and this is good. But in order to agree that this first idea is bad. It is important, the author is important, what they look for, what they're interested in, what is their horizon, what they want to share with the world. Is it a person that has something to show or say? There was Jerzy Wójcik, one of the best Polish cinematographers in history, he said this sentence once. We share what we have inside. So what we put on the screen is what we have inside. And this is very important. And because of all the technical, the important is the path that you took when you approach this moment, and what you want to say with this film about yourself and about the world. If somebody is not doesn't have enough experience, you have support them by creating good conditions for production, in terms of crew, in terms of humans, and to see how this would grow. So I think this is the point of departure. In case of our films, listen to your intuition. I didn't know why, but I knew that this Ptak girl is a good person I want to cooperate with. He wasn't even a director. He started directing studies after 3 years of making this movie. But at some point I had this notion that she will be developing, that she will grow in a direction that will make me want to be a part of her process. In the case of our movies, where we have been directing, I will always put my names on those pictures because as a co-director. First, make a movie that you would like to see on the screen yourself. I always film things that I would like to see, that draw me, that is interesting for me and attractive. That's the first thing. But also, you have to be fascinated with the protagonist somehow. This is the drive behind shooting every scene, because we're making movies which are a tale about life somehow of some people. Sometimes using the observations method, that we do not interfere too much. We do not stage things. Only later in editing we're trying to find a story. Or in the process of making pictures, shooting pictures, we do not interfere a lot. It's called a human story. There are also other genres which we don't take care of, and the human story is the protagonist. It has to be somebody who's interesting, who fascinates us, and agrees to be in the movie. When we feel it's a fascinating character that conveys certain metaphor about the world. Sometimes it's about the group, about the family, maybe it's brothers. The people who are the protagonists of our movies have to fascinate us, be fascinating for us. Then we see, okay, we have this fantastic chemistry going on between us, but then would they be able to convey that on the screen? it's also a big question in the future, but how to create a character that would be interesting for others, what story it will convey,
samej osoby za 10 lat.
or the same person in the 10 years. Yeah, in documentary you're also responsible, like, towards that person. Is it just our own scalping somebody and using it on the screen, or is it some form of symbiosis?
Tak jak nasza Nela była
Just like our Nella was in the Argentinian lesson, and she was not in the end titles, as if she wasn't there.
jak się nauczyła czytać,
Only when she learned to read, she said she wants to be in the end titles, and we had to change the copy of the movie.
się nie obraziła, tak?
So it's good that she didn't get offended.
Natomiast Janek na przykład
But Janek, for example, grew up and he said he's grown up right now, and he would not want this movie to be shown somewhere, anywhere.
może zmienić.
Maybe he will change his mind in the future, but we had to promise that.
Bardzo to ciekawe jest.
That's a very interesting thing.
Podejmujesz
That you make a decision for a child, and then the child changes your decision that she wants to have a different surname or doesn't want to be in a movie.
Mów, musisz to rozwinąć.
Nie, no bo to, słuchajcie, jak bierzemy w taki, zwłaszcza kilkuletni proces,
You're entering a multi-year process with somebody. If you're making a long film about someone, we take responsibility for this protagonist.
to jest osobny temat, ale to jest właśnie z tym bohaterem zostajemy do końca.
You stay with this protagonist until the end of your life.
Musimy się z tym liczyć, dlatego ja zawsze przestrzegam przed takimi filmami, które w związku z
So I really would try to warn you against movies who show people in bad light. Somebody, let's say, somebody's a criminal, did something wrong, and so if somebody's drugged or alcohol or under the influence of alcohol, filming such people, even if we want to convey wise content, let's say this guy destroyed her daughter throughout his life, but still in a documentary it's a person, it's a human being.
w tej kamerze wydaje na osąd taki, nie? A może się za kilka lat zmieni.
It might change. It might change for a number of years.
Na zawsze wymierzony
But the person after several years can change, and this film will always convey the same message about them. It was a bit like with Kieślowski, that this is you are responsible for the life of your protagonist and can follow them throughout their life. A feature movie where that's why he decided to go into feature and fiction, because it was less of a burden.
system, prawda? Wiadomo, że nie był złym człowiekiem,
Of course, he was not a bad man, that he would just wanted to destroy the person,
potraktował
but he treated this guy as
trochę taki homo sovietikus.
Homo Sovieticus, something that he sort of he but still it is a person,
Poczuł jakby
and he felt probably guilty, or maybe not guilty, but he felt responsible,
na kimś ciąży to, że teraz
and
coś takiego, co może...
they're left with something that can be harmful to that person.
Bo to jest bardzo jaskrawe.
This is I would say this is a very extreme case, but there are very many nuances. Even if you're filming somebody who's with strong emotions, very emotional, that can be a burden to someone. If you see yourself after some time on the screen, and you're all in emotions. We're all waiting to film Wojtek. Everybody was filmed in our family, for example, except for Wojciech. I think that Kieślowski understood this, that he knew what movies are, what are the important stories, and he knew that these are the emotions that we don't want to show outside, that we feel embarrassed about. That camera is an interesting tool that shows more than eyes can see.
Wiedział, jak to wyciągnąć.
And he knew how to get that out of actors and people, because first he learned in documentary how to see that, and then because camera also grasps that, and he saw that this is a very strong means of expression, and he got afraid of that. He got scared that he didn't want to leave those people
Właśnie nagich emocjonalnie przed tym.
emotionally naked on the screen.
Tego są aktorzy
This is what, and he preferred actors because actors are professionals, you know. Because I had this idea that I understand this reference with artificial intelligence, because in me, Kieślowski had this authenticity, and he had made so many movies. When he was created these stories, they had this element that you had in documentaries. And I think he realized that I was sometimes surprised that scripts of some of the documents, they were so written to such a big detail. They were like a feature movies scripts. I was surprised about some of the things, how Kieślowski could describe everything so precisely. But then I thought that he had this ability and decided to do that with professional actors. Analysis of Kieślowski's movies is incredible. There's a big. It was very important with the DOPs he worked with. We worked with Paweł Łoziński about Jacek Petrycki. He was telling a lot about. He was saying a lot about this. The first movies of Kieślowski. It's this combination of preparation but thoughtfulness. The thought of what he wants to express, and then he was searching, and when you're searching, the intuition sets off, because if you're entering a reality, whether it's documentary or fictionary, he was trying to find with his camera, he was just trying to get to those things that were not obvious. That's what the cooperation with the actor was very important. When I was watching a making ofs from Three Colors, he had a lot of trust in his cinematographers. You could sense that they came to the agreement, and he didn't interfere with it, especially from those fragments that I watched. He was talking to the actors, smoking, and yeah. Now that you had those stands and those previews, which are very precise, where we have movies, we can watch them in real time. On preview, 90% of the directors are sitting in front of this monitor, communicates with actors through a radio or through an assistant. And I have a feeling quite often the DOP or the camera, the director becomes the guy who's taking care of the cleanness, of compositional cleanness of the shot, rather than looking for truth in this film. When you had the film before and you couldn't see that from the outset, there was a lot of trust, which the director had to have a lot of trust to the cinematographer. He always asked after a shot or a dolly, was it okay? Yes, he said it was good. But then he would say, okay, we need to repeat that again because something went wrong. But then the director was listening to the guy, and he had to trust that this is the truth. And I feel some of the directors worked very well in that arrangement. I believe that if I were a director, I would prefer to work like that. I recently realized, this is a digression concerning the production, that the role of a director is to set in motion and set into life everything that is in front of the camera, set design, actors, etc., to make it alive, to make it real. And sometimes we forgot about this on the set. You know, let's say we believe that the director talked to the cinematographer. How do you frame that, like this or like that? But we're not thinking to make this authentic, that there was a real life there. That's why I'm pressing the directors on the set. I will tell you how we will film it when I see it in real life. If I see the live, I don't know how to film this. I can tell you we can do like this shot or that shot, but only when something starts to click there, when the real blood starts to flow through that, how people move, how to speak to one another. Only then you can set the camera, make the camera rolling. And if everything is set only for the camera, for me, it's untrue. Can I ask one more practical question? Because production, production and money, we talked about that, but how do you approach, how do you decide about the pay of a protagonist of a documentary? What sort of agreement? I've seen many. I've never seen a contract in which somebody else, a lawyer would say that he's not protecting something. The protagonist always can take back his agreements. 10 or 15 years ago, you would never pay the protagonist. This is not ethical. Right now, there's a different approach. There's always need to be a consent. But now the question of the fee goes through a change. Yes, because we're judging applications in PISF, and I see that there are some big pays proposed for the protagonists, and not symbolical ones. Where I so far I used very symbolic pays, explaining that this spoils this relation, that their participation is steered with the money. We decided not to pay fees, but we bought things for the protagonists. We helped them in some way, so that it's not that it's for playing a role in a documentary. It was, of course, a material help, but it was not so straightforward. But I think the times have changed. The producers are paying right now, and because you pay, the film ends, and this paid cooperation introduces some change, some weird relation. But I see money increasing. This is difficult because we have Marcia, who from Argentinian lesson, who for 13 years for 14 years now. She's been in our life, and it will not end. She's a film director. I don't know. We set up something like this, so it's not all so easy. The money is not everything. For me, she always, she's permanently grateful. For example, maybe if I have this, there's something that we never paid her, and it worked. She found herself so well in that movie. It makes us have our relationship on a different level. She was a kid at that time too, so it's a very difficult thing. Paying in documentary, it's a philosophical question. If you paid Michał with Jacek Bowik, if you do you know that they didn't pay? I can extrapolate that what would happen if they paid. But then what happened there, the biggest cost, he gave himself to those protagonists. and he influenced their lives because he was with them. To the extent I know Jacek and what sort of human being he is and how much it cost him, as how much time of his life he devoted to them. That was a cost. He was not with the family, he was with them. A lot of dedication from him. Sometimes it's not just a question of money. Okay, thank you. I think we've over time. Okay, thank you.